Once upon a time, the divinities were scattered, and all the gods and goddesses had been dead, killed themselves off. There was a war between the gods and goddesses, and they had been destroyed each other, and the ones soon after, the gods that survived, were themselves either killed off, died somehow, or disappeared off and away from Earth and into the cosmos, never to be seen or heard from again. But the truth is a different story, that these gods and goddesses of the ancient world were real, and they ultimately became human. So what happened is the gods and the goddesses created these humans, or the humans were known as their creation, even if they hadn't created them. But they had been put in charge over them regardless. And the gods and goddesses ran the world as the program, and the gods and goddesses were much larger than humans. They stood 10 to 12 feet tall, or even larger than that, so they were actually very distinguishable. You couldn't miss one when you saw one walking down the street. The gods and goddesses were at war for a long time and destroyed each other, and eventually all of them were gone and killed off. Their spirits that were destroyed survived, but their bodies, their immortal bodies, were killed off. So they did die, and it's really hard to kill a god or a goddess. Their divine immortal body was made of a golden ichor that was golden based. They didn't have cellular breakdown or any kind of genetic issues or problems. Their bodies lived indefinitely and were very tough. It was very hard to die, very impossible almost to kill a god or goddess. They just didn't die. They could jump off a Golden Gate Bridge and land in the water like it was nothing. They would just be like that was just swimming. So the reality is that you wouldn't be killing them easy. But but they did die. They could be probably a nuclear bomb. If a goddess or god sat on top of a nuclear bomb and detonated it, they'd probably be destroyed, and that's just a fact. But the reality is, it would take something like that to actually kill that immortal body. It was built so well. So the idea here is if the gods and goddesses had immortal spirits that were in immortal bodies. Understand what immortal spirits are. They're spirits that can't be killed. Some bodies can be killed. Our mortal bodies can be killed. Immortal bodies cannot be killed, or are very hard to kill, almost impossible. And immortal spirits are almost impossible to kill, or very, very hard to kill. Just like the immortal bodies would be, they'd be very tough. Those spirits don't die ever. They come back. And so ultimately, when a god or goddess lost his or her immortal body, well, their immortal spirit went into their high priest, or if they didn't have high priests or high priestesses, their spirit would go into whoever they knew, whoever was close to them that was still alive. And so how did the gods and goddesses become human? Well, they died, and their spirits had no body to go into, because the body that they were in, the immortal body of the god or goddess, was destroyed. So it would actually have nowhere to go. So it would go into probably its high priest or its high priestess, or it's someone who knew that was human. That's how they became human. So the first gods that went into the first humans, that was not something that was what they did. Gods did not possess humans. They possessed their immortal bodies. And when they possessed humans, they were now doing something different. And the humans became the first gods and goddesses of this world. That's when all these religions came in, because the gods and goddesses, for the most part, lost their bodies and became humans. These humans did not know, because the passing between the god and goddess body into the human world, well, it was either with memory or without memory. So if these gods or goddesses that went in to become human, if they either knew and remembered what happened, it's likely they didn't even know what happened. That in fact the human was born, the god was born with them, or the goddess was born with them, and they didn't know what happened. They couldn't recall the past, so they'd rely on the humans to tell them what happened in the past, and they wouldn't know who they were. Ultimately, if they could remember the death to birth process from the time they died into going into the human, if they could, it would just be something unique to a god or goddess. But understand, many of them probably wouldn't be able to, or would lose their memory as well. And so not even the gods or goddesses would know who they were anymore, but they'd certainly be somebody, some humans in the world, and they'd have an advantage and also a disadvantage. There was going to be some idea of what happens when the gods and goddesses in this world are at war and they are popped into the human race, and now the human race is warring. It's going to have everything to do with the gods and goddesses war, because the humans were not warlike, not until they became warlike, which was after the gods and goddesses had been in conflict for a long time. The gods and goddesses did not employ humans and fight with them on the human ground. Not until after the gods and goddesses were dying, and now we're Inhumans doing it. If they were in gods doing it, they didn't use humans to fight wars. They were doing their own thing without the humans, and that goes on to another story. Why someone would be innocent of doing anything that they were said that they would do, well, I'll tell you right now, you don't believe any stories that was told, but there's a reason why someone was blamed for doing something, because they need to come together, and that's another story I'll tell you in the next video as to why things seems like why something will be blamed on somebody and then it's not true, but the people that did the blaming are not wrong, because they needed to have it happen so something could happen that was even better, is that there'd be a reason to ascertain why a person was blamed. And that's another story, and I'll tell you about it later.